Welcome to the Jeffrey van Leeuwen Podcast, Episode 1. Today, I'm excited to introduce Marine Graaf, a psychology honors graduate currently working as a lay counselor at Steve Biko Academic Hospital in South Africa, where she provides emotional and spiritual support to both patients and staff. In our conversation, we've delved into her faith, the pursuit of the divine, and her experience in the field of psychology. She was an absolute pleasure to talk to, and I hope you will enjoy our conversation. If you enjoy this podcast, a like and subscribe would be much appreciated. And with that said, here is Marine Graaf. So hi Marine, good evening.
Hi Jeffrey, how are you doing?
I'm doing pretty well, how about yourself?
I'm also doing well, thank you.
Perfect, thank you so much for joining this evening, much appreciated.
Thanks for having me, it's exciting.
Absolutely, my pleasure. So we met actually on the Peterson Academy quite recently. Is it okay if we talk about that for a little bit?
100%, go for it.
Beautiful. Yeah, so the Peterson Academy is a digital spot and a project by Jordan Peterson, his daughter Michaela Peterson. We're trying to, I believe, create some sort of digital university in order to give people the education that is unbiased and free of, what would the word be?
Ideologies.
Ideology, that was it. Yeah, indeed. All right, so I noticed a few of your comments. In one of your first posts on the Peterson Academy platform, you referred to the Peterson Academy actually as a godsend. Could you tell me what you meant by that and what the platform means for you?
So, I already heard about the start of Peterson Academy. I believe they've been working on it for a year or so. I heard about it last year and I was very excited about it. And, you know, for me, coming from South Africa, you know, I feel quite removed from the rest of the world and all of the big universities in America or in Europe. So just the idea of having access to lecturers and their lectures from places like Harvard or Oxford or all of these really big universities, these really incredible people, that was really exciting to me. So, yeah, when I heard that it was starting, I got the email because I'm subscribed to Jordan Peterson's mailing list. And when I got the email, I was really excited. I didn't know what the cost would be, so I was kind of, you know, not too excited. But then when I made the calculations and I converted the dollars into rands, I was like, you know what, this is actually quite affordable for me. And it sounded like too good to be true. And, you know, we have great universities in South Africa. We really do. And I enjoyed my studies a lot. But there was always just like this, every university has its problems. And so there's always like a bit more that I was looking for, which I feel like I find on YouTube in some cases, but which I feel like Peterson Academy just offers. So that's why it really came at such a wonderful time, and that's why I think it's a godsend.
Yeah, because in the beginning you mentioned that you feel quite removed from the bigger universities in the West. So particularly you mentioned a couple, I believe, in England and in the United States. You also said that there's great universities in South Africa. What would you say the difference between those universities is?
Between the South African ones and the Western ones or the European ones?
The Western ones, yes.
Okay, the differences. Well, there's some good differences and there's some bad differences. Africa is still quite a conservative continent in general, so it's not as ideological, of course, because universities are where a lot of, you know, modern people tend to go. It's becoming a little bit more westernized, but it's not really to the level of, I would say, America. So that's one of the pros.
You mentioned, for example, Jonathan Jansen. Is that one of the lecturers that you're currently following in South Africa? I believe he's South African, right?
Oh, yes, yeah. He is South African. He actually did study in the States, but he's a professor of education at Stellenbosch University in the Cape, and he's quite amazing. He's a forward thinker, and he writes a lot of criticisms on some of the politically relevant stuff in South Africa, but he's trying to make the education system better, which I really like. And so we have a lot of politics, our own South African politics that I won't get into, that just make it difficult in the university sometimes. But in general, I think we do have a good education. It just needs a bit of development.
Yeah, so that's why you're particularly interested in the more, well, let's call it the Western lectures that are available on the Peterson Academy, because they provide a message or a piece of education that's currently lacking in most of the formal universities. Would that be a reasonable way to describe it?
Yes, I like the way you described it.
Perfect. Okay. So regarding those courses that are available right now, so I believe from the top of my head there are 16 courses that are 8 hours per piece, and they will add, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, 3 courses that are also 8 hours per course per month. And there's actually quite a bit available. I mean, you have philosophers like Plato available. You have Introduction to Nutrition that talks all about, for example, the fundaments of fat, of protein, carbohydrates, those kind of things. You have Jordan Peterson talking about Nietzsche. I believe you also have a course about the greatest leaders in history. Haven't seen that one yet, but it looks very enticing. So which one of the courses are you currently following? Have you finished any already? Which ones are you interested in? Could you walk me through that?
So I've currently started on symbolism and Christianity, which I'm enjoying a lot. And I'm just trying to do one at a time. I feel like that's enough for now. But I'm quite interested in doing the Nietzsche one and the Plato one.
Okay.
There's also that one on history of Western music, I think that's what it is, which I'm really interested in. Yeah, those are my top ones at the moment.
Yeah, so the one that you first mentioned, the Christianity and symbolism, or actually rather symbolism and Christianity, that's the one I'm currently looking at as my second course. The first one being Introduction to Nutrition. I finished it actually yesterday.
Oh, cool.
Do you think what do you think about that course for now? How far are you along with it?
I'm not too far along, but I really enjoy viewing the Bible, viewing Christianity from different viewpoints. I believe that, the Bible is such a profound book. You can analyze it quite deeply and find a lot of really interesting things. So I'm enjoying that a lot. I think it stretches your mind to see things differently, which I quite like. So I highly recommend it.
Yeah, it's absolutely bizarre. I saw, it was not too long ago actually, there's some sort of graph in which you can see correlations between different types of text in order to determine how deep a story is. And you can pretty much do that with any book or any story, right? So fiction, non-fiction, it doesn't matter. You can find correlations between different texts at specific parts within a book or within a piece of text. And it's like you see a bar of light go from one piece in the timeline to another piece in the timeline.
Oh yes.
Something like that. And the moment you check that with the Bible, it completely lightens up. The amount of correlations are almost infinite. Which automatically also means that the way you can read it, not just from start to finish, chapter by chapter, but yeah, there are so many orders, so many correlations. It's unbelievable deep.
Yeah, the cross-references. I've seen that image. It's quite amazing, especially when you consider that it's a book that was written by many different authors over an incredibly long period of time. The fact that it's so consistent in correlations, in cross-referencing is amazing. So it is quite an amazing book.
Have you read it completely start to finish?
Yeah, I would think so. Probably not starting from the front all the way to the end, but in bits and pieces. I've got the full book.
Right. I can imagine it takes quite a while in order to finish it completely if you read it from start to finish.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
would think so too.
Yeah, I've never actually done that myself. I just know some of the stories, but more as the story. So I didn't actually read any. Of course, I know some famous lines, right, from movies that come forward quite a bit, or from books, or from, for example, from lectures. But I've never actually read it myself. But it seems to be very interesting to do, and like you said, it strengthens the mind, and I also get that get an idea from it.
Yeah, it's quite, lots of people, everyone knows about the Bible, but a lot of people have never
Hmm.
really tried to read through the whole thing themselves. It's a lot of hearsay, and this person says that or that one says the other, but
Yeah,
I guess it's good to go through it yourself.
yeah, that's true. But also on the other side, to look at it from a different perspective, it's also quite logical that most people haven't read it. I mean, I don't know what the exact year is, but it is quite recently where we were even able to read it to begin with. So where the book was available as a full product. So 500 years ago, for example, I don't believe there was like a formal book that you can read from start to finish. So the stories were living more in the minds of people, and were being told that way. I'm not really sure what the year is. So if it's 100 years ago, or well, I can imagine it's a bit longer than 100 years. But I think 1,000 years, for example, yeah, those books weren't there yet.
Yeah, I think there was also in the Catholic Church, they kind of, well, people were illiterate in for a long time. The laymen were illiterate. So
Yep.
I think the Catholic Church kind of relied a lot on the interpretation of the priest to the people. And then there was, I'm not very familiar with the history, but I do remember when they started, say when people became more literate, and then, Bibles were given to laymen. So there was a bit of an outcry from the Catholic Church, I believe, but thank God that it's so, and that it happens so, and now everyone can read it for themselves. And it's gotten translated into, I mean, I don't even know how many languages, so.
Yeah, and even per language, there are a lot of different editions. I know, for example, once again, I'm absolutely everything but an expert on this subject, so I might be very wrong in what I'm saying. But I believe there's like 5, 6, 7 different versions all by itself. And for as far as my understanding goes, and once again, I might be very wrong on this, but for as far as my understanding goes, it also from different from different times that the different translations come from, in order to make sure that, for example, the version that is available right now is being understood with the language that the generation right now uses actually. So it becomes more, yeah, I guess, easy to understand.
Yeah, no, you're 100% right there. And there's new revisions coming out all the time, trying to really keep accurate to the translation of the Hebrew or the Greek, depending on which testament, which is great. And sometimes it's good to, I guess, read the different versions, because you can get, because they're all the same story. It's just semantic words that I guess are changed every now and again. So it's good to maybe read different versions. I feel like you can get a lot of depth, a lot more depth.
Do you think the revisions, do you think it also undermines the message to some degree, or is it, you think, a good thing that those revisions are happening in order to fit the time in which they are released?
That is a really difficult question. I'm not a biblical translator in any sense of the word, but I think it's important to keep relevant updates, to make sure that whatever translations are coming out are accurate and are truthful, and how do you say, committed to getting the truth of the Bible across. So I think it is important to have people working on it all the time.
Is Christianity the dominant religion in South Africa?
It's very interesting. So I would say it is somewhat dominant, yes, but we also have what we call African traditional religion, which is the most pervasive, I think. So that's, I'm not an expert in that at all, but that has to do with belief in the ancestors, and so that is quite a dominant religion all across Africa. But Christianity is also quite quite big.
Right. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. All right. I'm gonna make a little segue over here. And it also delves a little bit into your personality, because it seems that you, as a person, you are quite you have quite a strong interest in faith and psychology, but also in arts. Does that seem fair?
Yes, 100%. I'm really interested in it.
What drives this interest, you think?
It'll be a long answer. So I started getting interested in art from my grandmother. She's French, so she introduced me to a lot of the French artists. She's very interested in all of that kind of thing. And so it was really my first introduction into a Western, well, I guess it would be European philosophy and way of doing art. So I became really interested in that. And then along with my studies into French literature and philosophy in general, I kind of just saw the interplay between the two, and started developing my own ideas about what makes good art, why it's important, why we feel connected to certain artists and others not really. So I guess it all just kind of naturally evolved from my French heritage and my studies.
Yeah, what does connect you to an artist?
In my opinion. That's a very difficult question. What does connect you to an artist?
Is it like the message they're trying to bring across? So, if, for example, if you're listening to music, is it more like the melodies of the song? Is it more the message that really contains, that captures your interest? Is it more when you're looking at a painting that is a certain type of painting by a certain type of artist, where you can just see the different layers and the emotion that the painter was in? What do you think? What do you think it is for you?
I think it's a combination of when you can see a lot of skill from the artist, lots of hard work that's gone into trying to understand the art form. So if you take a composer or a pianist, for example, they practice and they study their art form, and then only after years, sometimes, of course you have prodigies, but after years they create this thing that becomes universally loved for what it is, not for any particular message it gives, or just for what it is. So I guess it's a combination of hard work and skill and the understanding of the art form that drives the artist to pursue this perfection, this divine product, which you can see in. That's why I love abstract art, because it's not necessarily trying to get any particular message across. It's not like a religious art piece. But good abstract artists, you can see that they have a deep understanding of light, of color, of texture. They didn't just pick up a canvas one day and say, okay, I'm going to, splash some paint on it. They worked hard to develop an understanding where they can create something, and that's pure creation, because it's not really anything that we can see in this world, but it's beautiful and it has form and it has depth and it has meaning. We can project that the meaning we think it has onto it, or the artist can tell us what meaning it has, but we can understand that there is something there that's meaningful.
I believe you also mentioned this in one of your later comments, and you said that, in this case you refer to the true artist, and that pursuing perfection, as you said it, comes close to pursuing the divine, and that the fact that the divine is perfect and human work cannot be perfect, it is inherently frustrating in order to pursue the perfect, but that when they come as close as they can, and that when the work they put out, whatever that work may be, that is actually something truly to behold. And I think that ties into what you just said. And I think, is it then a fair summary to say that getting that glimpse of like that almost perfection, that is what captures you?
Yes, I think it's art when it grazes that perfection or that divine, it becomes a portal into the divine, into the perfect. And this is something I've been thinking about for a long time, which is why I believe artists are so tortured, is because they understand that there is this perfection to be attained, this divine, and they spend their whole lives trying to find or trying to pursue and create that divine thing or that perfection. And it's frustrating because no one can ever really achieve perfection. Humans aren't perfect. So when they finally, that's why I say graze, because I don't know if we can ever, if we ever did manage to create a portal between the divine and this world, that would be quite cataclysmic. It would be quite an intense moment. But we graze it, and then that's when an artist makes a masterpiece, I think.
I've been actually trying to learn this lately. So you seem to have quite a good grasp on what makes very good art and what makes very beautiful art. And for me, it's a bit more, simple would not be the right word. It would more be, I'm a little bit more practical, I suppose, to it. So I can appreciate really great art, but I would appreciate it because the great art just looks very good, or I can see that there's a lot of skill in it. Let me give you a very weird example. For example, a painting like the Mona Lisa. Well, it's quite obvious that is a fantastic piece. It's incredibly detailed, and I believe just a year ago, or just 1.5 years ago, they found that there was some underlying layer that contained a hidden painting that was completely hidden by the surface. And I don't know how old the painting is, and when Da Vinci exactly lived, I believe it was 1400 or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But regardless, it's unbelievably deep. So obviously that's an amazing piece. What I can also appreciate is more the modern art. So you, for example, have specific artists that work on that draw more concept art for example, for movies or for video games. I find that very, very interesting, very beautiful to look at. But generally speaking, if you would ask me, like, okay, give me your 3 favorite painters, for example. I would have to Google first for an hour pretty much in order to find the proper answer for you.
That's totally fine. I think creation, it takes many different forms. So for practical people, that could be more engineering. I think that physics, mathematics, I think it's a different art form, but very much the same.
For sure.
In a way.
Yeah, for sure.
But I think it also takes a large part of appreciation is understanding. So that's why people who are in fine arts, who do the drawing and the painting, when they see something and they understand the skill that had to happen for that to be created, that just adds to the appreciation and especially of the genius. So I guess it's the same with people, with engineers or even businessmen, entrepreneurs who see Elon Musk, for example, who was able to create this massive empire. That's quite inspiring for them because they understand what has to go into it, I guess. So I think that's a large part of it as well.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, for me, it's not always like there are very old images like the Yin Yang, images like the Ouroboros. These are very old, and you could call them almost divine in the sense of they are quite religious in their in their imagery. It's not really obvious to me at all, in the beginning at least, what the meaning behind certain images is. And Ouroboros, I don't know if you know that from name. It's a snake that eats its own tail in a circle.
I know the yin and yang. I haven't heard of the Ooglepoogle. Is that what you call it?
Yeah. So the Ouroboros. It's I'm quite sure you've seen it somewhere. It's the snake that goes in a circle and it eats its own tail.
Okay.
So, you could look at that and think like, okay, it's a snake that eats its own tail. What would that mean? And the answer, well, there's a lot of different ways to look at it, I believe. And one of the ways is the idea of self-sacrificing in order to prosper. So you have to sacrifice the thing that is not, that doesn't help you strive forward, I suppose.
Yeah.
So let ideas. For example, what Peterson often says is let ideas die instead of you. You know,
Yes.
leave behind what is not relevant, so they might not stop you in the future. That's another way to think about it. And
Yeah.
that's a form of self-sacrifice. And I believe that's one interpretation that, for example, the Ouroboros could give. And with examples like that, all of a sudden when they're explained like that in that way, and I'm listening to it, it kind of makes a lot of sense, and you get a very much deeper appreciation for that piece of art or that piece of imagery. That's generally how it works for me. It's not
Oh, I
something that's
love.
quite obvious from the beginning.
Yeah, no, I love that. I think it's very, very relevant. A beautiful way of thinking about it. I never thought of that before, but it's so true. The self-sacrificing aspect to get to where you want to go. And there's a lot of sacrifice that has to be done in art, I guess. So it's a great way of looking at it.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's also one of the reasons why, well, at least once again from my outline just now, that artists, I guess, are usually very much underappreciated, because it is not obvious at first glance or even at second glance what the artist is trying to convey. It's also
Yeah.
very interesting. For example, if you think about that usually pieces of art, well, the famous pieces of art, I believe, became way more valuable after the artists themselves passed away. It's
Yes.
something I still don't really understand why that is. Maybe it has something to do with the fact that it cannot be reproduced anymore because the original
Yes.
drawer is away, and therefore it increases in value because it's a scarce commodity. Is it
Yeah.
something that you understand?
No, I was kind of leaning toward the same interpretation you had of, the artist passes away and then it becomes valuable because it can't be reproduced. But it's also sometimes that happens with philosophers as well, where, the person has to die and then their work becomes well known. That happened with Soren Kierkegaard, who was actually quite ridiculed and mocked in his day, and he wasn't widely read at all. And then when he died, he became quite well known and quite revered. So I think there's also something about knowing that it was made by a person, a very flawed individual, and knowing that individual in their lifetime, that makes people not really take note of the art. But then once the genius is all you can see, maybe that's what people are driven or geared towards. It's an interesting train of thought to go down.
Yeah, for sure. And it doesn't just happen in visual art. A very good example that comes to my mind when you outlined that was a writer called H.P. Lovecraft. I believe he was born at the end of the 1800s, 1890 or 1891, and he died also quite early. I believe he was sick. He died when he was, I believe, 40, 45, maybe something like that. Quite a controversial figure, controversial for his thinking. He was, for example, he had some racial ideas that were, well, once again, quite controversial. But his stories, for example, one of the most famous characters that he wrote about was Cthulhu, which is kind of like a squid monster that's living on the bottom of the ocean. Well, I'm quite sure that most people, at least if they have any recent memory in like movies or video games or something like that they've heard of the character Cthulhu. That's actually coming from Lovecraft. The guy, once again, was, I believe during his lifetime he never found success. I believe he was very poor, just going by. He was very resentful in his life. He didn't have many friends. He was not a fun character to be around for, as far as my understanding goes.
Yes.
But which also inspired his very dark stories, obviously. So you could make the argument that it had some value because the stories that he wrote were very, very unique because of it, I suppose. But his stories became famous after he died.
Yes.
I'm not really sure which year, but it was after he died. He never saw success because of it.
It's such an interesting concept. I guess often, geniuses, they're just human and they have a lot of flaws. So I guess, especially because they're genius, they have perhaps more exemplified flaws, and people don't generally like being around them. Maybe when they're,
Yeah.
So after they die and that individual is kind of lost into like legend or myth, like, oh, he was strange. People like that, but they don't actually really like being around strange people. But
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
so we like the idea of a genius being strange, but yeah, it's quite interesting. There's something about that in the martyr as well. You know, the tyrant is well known, but a martyr is only known after they die. So, and I guess, yeah, there's something beautiful about dying for your art while you're still not known.
Do you think it strengthens the art if they died for their art, or that their art was inspired by their experiences which caused them to pass away, or something like that? Because there is another example that I can think of. There's a very old book. It's quite a short book from, I believe, beginning 1900s and 1800s, I believe. I forgot what the name of the writer is, but the book is called The Yellow Wallpaper. Have you ever heard of it?
No, I haven't.
It's a short story written by a woman in the time. I'm not really sure even what the country was. Maybe it was England or something like that.
Yes.
But pretty much it was written by a woman who was kept in her house by her husband, and her husband just kept her in the house, you know. Got into her mind that she was sick, that she couldn't go outside, and she couldn't do anything creative because it would make her weak or depressed, and you know, she was like a scared little bird being locked in the house, pretty much not being able to do anything, and it drove her absolutely crazy. And the story goes about the yellow wallpaper. So on the attic, she went there to be creative without her husband knowing. And she was writing stories, which was then the book that you would read, you know, those 35 something pages. And it was about, you know, experiences. Just it started very, very mundane, you know, just all, you know, what she sees when she looks outside the window and whatever.
Yes.
But this yellow wallpaper was really in her mind. And there were it was a very weird form of yellow, a very dirty form of yellow. And when she looked at it, there was some kind of patterns in it, you know, flowers, some kind of flowers that went all over the place. And she was looking so long at it for days, maybe even weeks, maybe even months at an end, that she saw patterns in it. And that patterns became like a crawling shadow figure that she saw running around. It just, well, pretty much she was describing psychosis.
Okay.
It was a very, like, to use your terms, a very tortured artist kind of situation, I suppose.
Yeah, I love that. And you know, going back to your question about the artist dying before their art gets well known, like this author, I think it does make the art noteworthy, perhaps more meaningful, because it's so easy to write or to paint for acclaim. And you know, if everyone tells you, if the whole crowd is chanting, yes, we like this is the way to go, you're not driven by the art itself, you're not driven by a pursuit of truth, you're driven by
yeah, that makes sense,
the masses. So I guess when someone dies, you know, having pursued their art without people telling them that it's great art, there's a level of integrity there. Like Van Gogh, like Nietzsche, like Søren Kierkegaard, these wonderful artists who died before, before great acclaim. It showed that they were in pursuit of the art itself, and not in pursuit of acclaim.
But their art was like a perfect representation of their thought.
Yeah, I would guess so. You know, Søren Kierkegaard has that quote. He says he needs to find the idea for which he is willing to live and die. And I think that's something that underlies a lot of the really great thinkers or artists. And it's, you know, unique to each of those people. Like you said, it's their thought. It's their culmination of their life. Yeah. Yeah,
for sure. And that's also, I think, how you get the best message across. It can go very wrong for obvious reasons, because not everybody's thoughts are as good as they could be, I suppose.
Yeah,
but
that's true.
Yeah, the examples that you're laying out right now make perfect sense, actually. The moment you conform yourself too much to what others are saying and what the others are cheering for, I suppose, your message is not your message anymore. Your message is the message of the crowd.
Yes.
And the crowd, is not that unique. Because it's, 5,000, 50,000 voices all mixed together.
Yeah.
It's not you anymore.
Yes. And
Yeah.
I don't think people are genuinely, the truth is something you have to sacrifice a lot for. It's hard to find, it's hard to pursue, and people don't really like to hear the truth. So to pursue it is, like you said, it's that self-sacrificing journey, and that people probably won't understand until they have to look at the culmination of what it is that you pursued. The culmination of what you find when you do pursue the truth in a self-sacrificing way.
Let's do a little segue to you. So we just discussed a bit of faith, but you are also very interested in psychology in general. Could you tell me where this interest is coming from? Why psychology?
Okay, sure. So I started studying a BA languages, but with any bachelor's degree, in your first year you can choose between 7 and 8 subjects. So it doesn't have to be limited to languages. You can choose anything you want. And so I decided to take a bunch of things that looked interesting. I took philosophy, psychology, ancient Hebrew, just a lot of those kinds of things, and I really loved all of them, enjoyed all of them. I really enjoyed learning about psychology, about all the different theorists, about the observation of human behavior, how that can be put into frameworks, maybe imperfect frameworks, but can be conceptualized. And then it was in that same year that I towards the end of my first year that I discovered Jordan Peterson, and
this was in which year?
This was 2020.
2020, okay.
Yeah.
So right at the start of the Corona period.
That's then.
Yeah.
When everything kind of came online. So I believe it was at the end of 2020 where everyone's at home. All our lectures were online. Our entire university system was online, and I got more into YouTube, and I discovered Jordan Peterson through that, and then I found out he was a clinical psychologist. I'd already been doing research into psychology, what the career paths were, and so I decided, well, I'm really interested in it. Let me just take it up to third year. So I triple majored in Zulu, French, and psychology. So even though I have a bachelor's degree in languages, one of those is psychology.
Right. So 2020, you said, as a starting point when you were first introduced to his lectures online, I think you said?
Yes, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, so that was actually in the West, and with the West I generally mean the United States and Europe. It was the time when the lockdowns happened, and when the whole thing with the mouth masks happened. How did that time look over there? What was the impact? What happened?
I mean, it was pretty much the same. South Africa is very interesting because we have our own politics and our own struggles, but we're very interested in the Western politics, even though it has no bearing on us whatsoever.
Really?
We all talk about that, yes. So there was a lot of, all the debates that were going on in the West kind of filtered down into South Africa, and there was polarization with like vaccine, no vaccine. Everyone kind of wore the masks. Of course, there were a few people who were anti-mask and all of that kind of. So there was a little bit, I would say, nowhere near as polarized in the West, but we had our own lockdown. South Africans, we take everything with humor. So there were a lot of jokes going around, so it wasn't as hectic in terms of politics, but it was an interesting time for sure.
I actually read this. I was looking at vacation trips to South Africa yesterday or the day before, and one of the first things I saw that is, if you go to South Africa, make sure you smile a lot, because the South Africans are full with humor and are very friendly in general. That's actually the first tip that I saw, and that's, well, according to your answer, that's very true.
Yes, no, that's very true. I've heard that a lot. And after traveling overseas, sometimes I do miss home, because as soon as you step off that plane, you know that there's going to be friendly people. And We like to chat. So if you're in a grocery line, like, it's totally normal to talk to the person next to you as if you've known them for 15 years. We're a very friendly
Right.
nation, so I love that. And we do take everything with a lot of humor. It helps us get through a lot of the tough stuff we have to deal with. It's one
I
of the things
love
I'm
that.
very proud of. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely love that. It's sometimes something that I'm missing over here in well, specifically in Netherlands. It depends on where you are. There are certain cities where you go, or small towns where everybody's just incredibly friendly. You know, you see your neighbor walking the dog, for example, you wish him good morning, he wishes you good morning as well. It's very very nice to have those interactions in the morning. But there's also some other places, you know, usually the bigger cities, where that is a little bit less the case. It's more everybody for themselves. Everybody's just going to work. You know, leave me alone because I want to just get to work. That's pretty much it. Everybody's
Yeah.
just living their own life. So it really depends on where you are.
Yeah. I have noticed that in Europe. It does depend on where you are, though. But people say that it comes down to the, how do I say, the worldview of,
Hmm.
Africans in general. South Africa, we have this concept called Ubuntu, which is very well known. It's I am because we are. So South Africa is very communal. It's not really individualistic, which is a very Western European thing. It's extremely, about the social community. So I think that that's part of what influences how we interact with other people. Of course, there's pros and cons to either worldview, but yeah, it's very interesting to see how people um, perceive us and how South Africans perceive the rest of the world.
I actually knew the name. Well, not the name. I knew the word Ubuntu, but
Mm.
from a very different perspective. So I have an IT background, and Ubuntu is actually one of the names of the major distributions for Linux, which is a operating system.
Okay,
So that's called Ubuntu. So now I know what it's based on. So
there
it's
you
based
go.
on it's you said it's a slogan. So everybody in South Africa lives by that slogan. Is that a way to think about it?
It's a good way of thinking about it. Yeah, pretty much. So it's a shortened it's one word of the longer phrase. I don't know the longer phrase, but
Okay.
everyone in South Africa knows it. Knows what it means. It's a huge foundation of our culture, um, across all of the different, because we have 11, I think, official languages. So across all of the
Hmm.
different tribes
That's a
and
lot.
genres of people, yeah,
Yeah.
everyone knows that.
I am because we are. I love that.
Yeah.
That sounds like a really good motto to live by.
Yeah, I love it as well.
Amazing. Well, perfect. Well, back to psychology. So, this is something that you're studying right now, and you've been studying it for a few years. Is it something
Hmm.
that you were always interested in, even when you were younger? Like the human side of everything and how people were thinking, how people were behaving, what drove people. Is it something that you learned to be interested in for some reason, or is it something that came natural to you?
I never really thought of psychology as a discipline or a practice until I was introduced to it in university. But I think everyone develops a self-reflective ability as they grow,
Hmm.
um, to a greater or lesser extent, depending on the person. So there was always that kind of human observation aspect that I had, that I believe we all have. We all observe each other, observe human interactions, and that's what some people are more interested in it than others. So I think that I've always had that, but it was definitely started in university. And yeah, then I carried on after my bachelor's. I did an honors in psychology, which is the fourth year. And at the moment, I'm busy gaining experience to do my master's. It's extremely competitive, I think, all over the world, but especially in South Africa, to do a master's in psychology. There's a lot of competition, so you need quite a bit of experience before you can really make a strong application.
And by experience, you mean experience in the field?
Yes, so any kind of experience in the field. There's lots of different genres, different things one could do.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. So I believe right now you are doing some work at the Steve Biko Academic Hospital, right?
So, I work as a lay counselor. It was a volunteer opportunity that they offered to people with an honors degree in psychology. You could apply, and then they would take you through the interview process, and then if you were selected, you would be allowed to come to the hospital. And basically what it entails is providing kind of basic psychological, emotional, or spiritual support to all of the patients and the staff in the hospital. We create initiatives, group initiatives, but it's mainly individual lay counseling.
Okay. Yeah, so the definition of lay counseling is someone who is not licensed, but who is doing emotional support and counseling, and like you said, spiritual support. That's then the definition of a lay counselor.
Yeah, pretty
Okay.
much.
Okay. So how does someone come into contact with you? How does that path start? How does that look, generally speaking?
So it looks different depending, because we have walk-in clients, people who know we exist, and then they come into the office and they ask for an appointment. And
Okay.
then those people have generally made the step towards, committing, and they, depending on the counselor, they're willing to speak and open up. And then the other side of it is getting involved. You get assigned a ward every month, and so you go to that ward and you will approach each of the patients that are there, just check on their well-being. And that's very interesting, because a lot of the time people will say they're fine, so you can ask them and explain who you are, and then they'll say, yeah, no, I'm doing well, I'm okay. And then you just ask them, like, okay, how long have you been in the hospital? And after you show genuine interest, people really do open up, and you hear a lot about their lives, and it's such a powerful thing that I really enjoy. So it really depends on the different circumstances around it. Some people are more willing to open up, some people not. But yeah, that's pretty much what I do.
So the people that go to the hospital, is it a certain type of problem that you're focusing on, or it can be pretty much anything, whatever they may be dealing with, or whatever disorder they may be dealing with?
No, so this isn't like a psychiatric hospital at all. It's a full-on hospital. We have people who get strokes, amputations. We have the trauma
Right.
ward.
Okay.
So it's really, you don't know what you're gonna get on the given day, which makes it exciting and interesting. But for example, I've been working a lot in the stroke neurology ward.
Mhm.
And that's quite interesting, because a lot of it involves, our work involves helping with the transition from hospital back to home after people have gone through something as traumatic as a stroke. And just being able to make that transition easier for the family, it's so necessary, but it doesn't really exist. So I feel like we are filling a little spot in the system.
Yeah, and I can imagine it's very valuable, especially with your example about a stroke. I know specifically of a situation where someone got a stroke, and well, he survived, and everything is fine, as so far it can be fine after a situation like that. But obviously he couldn't work straight away in the same capacity that he was doing before, and his speech was also a little bit impaired. And he was very aware of that as well. So it was very frustrating. For as far as I understood, it was very frustrating, because the person feels like, yeah, I'm fine. I just want to get going. I want to be valuable to the people around me, to
Yeah.
my partner, to my children, to everybody. While everybody's also at the same time telling him, you have to calm down, you have to rest, you have to take it easy, you have to recover properly. Don't take this too lightly. Take it seriously, which is very difficult and very hard. And I think that's putting it mildly.
Yeah, that's something that I find so pertinent, is we haven't yet realized how important a holistic approach is to a person's healing. So you can heal them physically, give them the meds they need, but if the person hasn't processed what has happened, isn't coping well, is stressed out, it affects the overall well-being and the healing process significantly. We also get a lot of patients or walk-ins that have psychosomatic symptoms or psychosomatic disorders where they have these physical manifestations of pain or dysfunction, but there's no medical, physical, biological reason why it's happening. And then upon, deeper investigation, it's all related to psychology. A lot of it's related to stress triggers or a bereavement that manifests as a physical symptom. Like I had a walk-in of a guy who had, I think it was called neurological function disorder, and he is totally off balance. He can't write, he can't function physically because all of his neurons are misfiring, but there's no biological, medical basis that they can see for why this is happening. It's all to do with stress, and he is an individual, after speaking to him, that experienced a really intense traumatic life riddled with stress. And so the only real treatment for that is psychological, even though all of the manifestations are physical. So I think it's becoming more known to take a more holistic approach to healing, which is wonderful, but there is still that stigma everywhere of, if you're getting psychological help, you're not strong enough to deal with it on your own, where it's like, it's like saying to someone who's ill, oh, you're not strong enough to get over your illness on your own. Why do you need to see a doctor?
It's a ridiculous way to look at it.
Yeah, so I love seeing the real examples in the world of that, and that the stigma is slowly disappearing.
Yeah, especially the whole thing that you said that there's no specific cause that you can point at, yet all the physical symptoms are there that you can see. Could it also be the case that it might be a chemical reaction? So the reason why I'm asking is because I know of a case where a person broke their back while doing, I believe it was skiing or snowboarding or something like that, and made a jump, landed on their back, and it was not on the snow, it was on a rock. So it was a very, very nasty accident. And I know that it led to some chemical imbalances in the back, and obviously that can also lead to chemical imbalances in the brain, which then in return can lead to stress or other kinds of situations.
Yes.
So might an accident like that, in this specific case, for example, would that be a reasonable cause that could have caused that?
I mean, it's possible. That's why history taking is so important, and why even in psychological or psychology intakes, therapeutic intake forms, you ask about the medication they're on, history of injuries, because it is all related. So that's a definite possibility. And the chemical imbalance, I think, is what people also need to realize with psychiatric medication, why it can help so much. It's because oftentimes some psychiatric disorders are a cause of chemical imbalances. So, yeah, it's very possible.
Yeah, I mean, also, I believe, Andrew Huberman, for example, is a person who talks quite often about that. And one of the things I learned from, I believe it was him, he said that mental health is downstream from physical health, which is exactly the reason why if you are feeling sad or if you don't really have a lot of energy, that a very good thing to do would be to do a workout in order to exercise your body, get the blood flowing, get the minerals flowing, and put your body to work. And then that's, after you're done, it will not only provide you with a dopamine shot, it will also provide you with the, I don't know if it's nutrients or other chemicals that go into your brain, but it actually provides a direct, instant relief to whatever stress you're having.
Yes.
Which is a very interesting concept. I actually didn't know that. So it's not just that fixing psychological issues is fully with, for example, with counseling or with just talk. It can quite literally be a physical thing, a physical cause.
Yes, 100%. I remember Jordan Peterson speaking about this, about he would get clients in who were depressed or they were anxious, and you would ask them, are you getting enough sleep? Well, no. Are you eating enough protein? Well, no. Are you getting any sunlight? Well, no. Are you drinking water?
Well, there you go.
No. It's like, I think a lot of the causes of the most common psychiatric disorders like depression or anxiety are from the neglect of those simple basic things. Yeah, I 100% agree with that. Again, it's all interlinked.
Yeah, it's very good to be aware of that. Just eating healthy, don't eat fast food, workouts, do resistance training and cardiovascular training a couple of times a week at least. Simple stuff like that. Drink a lot of water. Stay away from chemicals in drinks and in food. Simple stuff like that. It can provide a huge boost. And also having social interaction with people. Let's not forget that. It's
Yes.
how was it described? That social interaction prevents a person from going insane because it provides them an opportunity to order their thoughts.
Yes, oh my goodness, I love that. And isn't that just exactly I feel like that's exactly what the therapeutic space is. Oftentimes, people don't have the social support needed to be able to bounce their thoughts, order their thoughts. And so they come to counseling and to therapy, and it's the first time where they have to actually put words to what they're feeling, to what's happening, process their whole lives, reflect, self-awareness. I think that's a skill that we learn through social interaction that a lot of people don't necessarily have because they don't have someone they trust to speak to. So, yeah, I think counseling is the perfect symbol of that kind of need.
Yeah, 100%. And just the idea of someone that listens to you and someone that's genuinely interested in you as a person and in what your thoughts are, and taking the time out of their schedule in order to understand where you're coming from. Actually, it's very funny. Andrew Huberman was a guest at Joe Rogan, I believe a couple of days ago, and I was actually listening in the car, the podcast this morning. So I have to travel around an hour, 1.5 hours to my job when I go there, and of course also back, so 2 to 3 hours on a day, which I fill with podcasts like these. And they were actually also talking about this specific subject. Which is, it's super, super interesting and very true. It seems very true.
Yeah, I also have to drive quite far to the hospital, and that's when I fill my time with podcasts and with all of these kind of things. So,
Beautiful.
it would be terrible, but it makes it better.
Yeah, absolutely. How many hours of podcast do you burn a week, you think?
Oh my goodness. We're not getting into that. An ungodly amount.
Yeah, I know. It's a good. Let's just call it a positive way. Nah, it's not a waste of time. That's a bad joke. It's a very good way to spend your otherwise
Yeah, no,
time
I
that you
agree.
don't
You're
spend on
otherwise
anything.
wasting
Yeah,
time. There you go.
yeah,
I agree
yeah,
100%.
for sure. Beautiful. All right, Marine. Looking ahead, what are your goals? You mentioned you're gonna work on your masters. What's in it for the future for you?
Aiming up, I guess, would be the best thing to say. But yeah, I'm looking to do my master's, either in counseling psychology or clinical psychology. But for now, just working towards being impactful where I am. I love my job. And just seeing, where God will take me.
Well, I think that's a very beautiful outlook.
Thank you.
Is there anything else from your side that you would like to add before you wrap up?
Just that I think you're going to be a great podcast host. This was really great.
Oh, thank you.
Yes.
I appreciate that.
Well researched, lots of really valuable insights. So, looking forward to what you're going to post.
Thank you very much.
I'm glad. Thanks so much, Jeffrey. Appreciate it.
Beautiful. All right. Take care.
Thanks so much.
And with that, Marine Graaf has left the conversation. I want to thank you for joining me in this conversation, and I hope you found it useful. If you enjoyed this conversation, please consider liking and subscribing. And with that said, take care.